It's not time for the funeral, but it's time to start thinking about a will. You know, once upon a time, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was the crown jewel of the movie industry. It was loved and loathed by insiders because it brought in an eye-popping amount of money, while at the same time looked down on for being hollow theme park rides instead of real cinema. No matter how industry pros felt, though, audiences loved Marvel. But now you get suspicious whenever someone says they even faintly enjoyed an MCU project. In less than half a decade, Disney's set a record in the category of IP destruction, imploding a franchise like Marvel that could pump out billion-dollar movies like Captain Marvel, and now can't even get Fantastic Four to beat out fucking Ant-Man at the box office. Marvel's attempt at course correction appears to be floundering. Despite a couple well-received movies back-to-back, it may be too little, too late. Before we carry on, a quick word about the sponsor of this video. And as always, my friends, I timestamp these motherfuckers for your convenience. So you don't have to watch if you don't want to, but if you do, you know I love you, baby. Okay, look, some of you may love to cook, but not all of us are blessed with endless spare time and the ability to use a knife without immediately slicing a finger. That's where the sponsor of this video, DoorDash, comes to save the day. My fridge? Decorative. My cooking skills? Basically a myth, but when work is crushing my soul and my stomach is screaming at me, I'm not about to go fight through traffic. I just tap on my DoorDash app like the panic button it is. DoorDash just gets me. They know I'd rather stare at my phone than my stove. Sushi in my sweatpants? Done. Pounding 11 tacos at midnight without leaving my couch? Yes. And downloading the app is as easy as opening up your app store of choice and searching DoorDash. Plus, if you use my discount code MovieCynic50, you can get 50% off up to $10 on your first order of $15 or more. But move fast, this is a limited time offer. So if your idea of cooking is just hitting the reorder button, download DoorDash today. DoorDash is your door to more. Embrace the life of luxury and let strangers bring you joy in the form of chili cheese fries. Your stomach and your dignity well, thank you. Shout out to DoorDash for sponsoring this video, and now back to it, baby. The numbers are undeniable. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is in full-blown collapse. What was once considered the bottom rung of success, the floor, is now the ceiling. During the first 3 phases, Marvel built a streak of dominance with nearly every release pulling in over $500 million globally. 19 films, most clearing that benchmark with ease, and the few that didn't were early efforts, back when the concept of a cinematic universe was still a novelty. Even those exceptions helped to build a foundation that would eventually become the gold standard for blockbuster storytelling. But now, that foundation has completely eroded. The numbers for Fantastic Four are in, and they're disastrous. Just over $38 million in its second weekend, marking a drop of more than 67% from its opening. That freefall is especially damning because the film wasn't rejected by audiences or critics. It received an A- cinema score and even managed to earn praise from voices that normally rip these things apart, including me. Ha! Gay! That level of goodwill used to guarantee Marvel another hit, another cultural moment, another notch in its belt. Now it barely moves the needle. The core fan base still shows up, but that's all that's left. The general audience, the one Marvel spent years courting and expanding, has moved on. They're not buying the hype anymore. Fantastic Four was supposed to be a soft intro to the team with no baggage, and hopefully a return to form. Instead, it looks like another failure. It probably won't crack $600 million, and it almost certainly won't earn a theatrical profit, and this was one of the big ones. A recognizable title with built-in interest, a property Marvel was banking on to jumpstart the next phase of relevance. If this is how a marquee name performs, someone better fire the flare gun. The cinematic universe is in distress. And you might be asking, why is this happening? Well, it's because the MCU has been spraying sewage at the audience for the better part of 5 years. Ever since Endgame rolled credits, it's been a non-stop flood of irrelevant, disjointed, creatively bankrupt content. And what's worse, none of it matters. If you're trying to prep for Avengers Doomsday, the alleged culmination of this post-Endgame sludge heap, you really only need to watch Spider-Man No Way Home and maybe Fantastic Four. That's it. 2 movies. Everything else? Useless. Fluff, noise, unwatchable filler, masquerading as world building. Actually, you could slap together a 5-minute montage of the Fantastic Four and give the audience more emotional investment than the last 20 Marvel projects combined. What does that tell you? Well, it tells you that none of this crap has stuck. It tells you the entire post-Endgame phase has been one long, pathetic experiment in seeing how much bullshit the audience will tolerate before walking out. They've introduced more characters than a Game of Thrones family tree, and yet no one gives a fuck about any of them. Shang-Chi, however you say it, forgotten. Captain Marvel, radio silence. You don't hear whispers of more sequels because even Marvel knows no one is asking for them. It's a studio in panic mode, flinging IP against the wall and praying something leaves a stain. And since nothing is, they're scrambling back to the only trick they've got left, Memba berries.
Oh, remember Robert Downey Jr.? Oh, I remember.
Bring back Robert Downey Jr., this time as Dr. Doom, because fuck it, why not? Dust off the Fox X-Men cast and glue them to Doomsday. Shove Deadpool and Wolverine into the limelight, because at least those guys sold tickets 10 years ago. If you're trying to pinpoint where all this went wrong, you don't start with Multiverse of Madness or Quantum Mania or even the Marvels. You go back to the beginning of Phase 4, because the cracks in the foundation were always there. They were just easier to ignore when the machinery was still printing money. Phases 1 through 3 worked because they had a structure, not just a vague theme or tone, but an actual roadmap. From the early days, Marvel had the Infinity Stones, the Infinity Gauntlet, and Thanos positioned as the endgame, literally. The Tesseract wasn't just a shiny blue cube, it was the narrative anchor for an entire saga. Thanos was introduced in the early stages, and every film, even the filler, pushed things a little closer to the inevitable climax. There was a sense that things were building towards something that mattered. Contrast that with the post-Endgame era. There is no structure, no goal, no final boss worth caring about until just recently. The plan, if you can even call it that, was Kang, apparently. A character so charisma deficient he couldn't even hold Ant-Man 3 together. Kevin Feige now claims he always intended to pivot after Quantumania, which is corporate speak for I'm fucking lying. But whether he's rewriting history or just bluffing his way through press junkets, the result is the same. What we've gotten instead is a chaotic sprawl. Dozens of characters introduced, barely any developed. A vague gesture at a multiverse that exists solely to excuse lazy plotting and endless retcons. 2 entire phases of content with no cohesive vision, no meaningful stakes, and no clear direction. Only noise. And now the audience has stopped listening. That lack of vision becomes even more glaring when you remember that phases 1 through 3 didn't just have a story arc, they had a lead. Tony Stark was the anchor. He wasn't just a character, he was the character. The emotional core, the moral compass, or lack thereof, and the narrative driver of the entire saga. By phase 3, Captain America stepped into a co-lead position, creating a clear, deliberate dynamic that gave the universe structure and weight. Every storyline orbited around them. Every major event tied back to their arcs. That clarity kept the audience locked in. Now look at phases 4 and 5. Who's the main character? Who's the emotional center of this entire circus? There isn't one, because Marvel didn't build anything. They just kept throwing more parts onto the pile. The new pivot point is the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom, who are just now showing up at the final hour. So what the hell are phases 4 and 5 even for? What have they set up? Where is the payoff? It all feels like filler. Worse, it feels like filler that no one even likes. Sam Wilson as Captain America? How about no? Shuri as Black Panther. Polite applause, now let's recast him. The Marvels, dead on arrival. And Thunderbolts, the few people who actually saw it apparently liked it, but that didn't stop it from tanking so hard the studio might want to reconsider them as the new Avengers. There's no storyline holding any of this together. There's no central villain driving things forward. And there's absolutely no lead character guiding the audience through this mess. Marvel is 6 phases deep, and they're just now figuring out who the main players are supposed to be. But of course, this creative implosion gets worse. When Disney bought Fox, Marvel acquired the rights to the Fantastic Four and X-Men, 2 of the most iconic properties in comic book history. They had the keys to the kingdom, and instead of using them, they locked the door and walked away. See, Marvel was riding so high at the time, they convinced themselves they didn't need those characters. The brand alone would be enough. The logo was the selling point. They believed they could slap the Marvel name on a lunchbox full of C-list rejects and rake in $1 billion. Isn't that right, Malcolm?
Before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox.
That's why instead of leading with the Fantastic Four or fast-tracking the return of the X-Men, they spent years wasting everyone's fucking time. We got Eternals, we got Echo, we got The Red Guardian, a half-assed Cold War parody with no purpose beyond padding out ensemble casts. These weren't bold new directions, they were just filler projects pretending to be expansion. Characters with no staying power, no audience connection, and no long-term viability. Projects greenlit not because they mattered, but because Marvel assumed the audience would swallow anything as long as it came with a mid-credits scene and a tie-in Funko Pop. There have been rumors that contractual red tape kept Marvel from recasting the X-Men until 2026. That's never been confirmed, and even if it's true, it doesn't excuse the inaction. They're bringing back the Fox X-Men for Avengers Doomsday, so there was always a path forward. The multiverse gave them every narrative loophole they needed to do whatever they wanted. They could have reintroduced legacy characters, tied together loose ends, and used Secret Wars as the reset button it was clearly meant to be. Instead, what we're getting is a half reboot, a soft reset with leftovers. Characters from those failed phases, 5 and 6, will almost certainly bleed into the post-Secret Wars world. Even after Marvel wipes the slate clean, they're going to keep smudging it up with remnants of the same half-baked ideas that tanked audience interest in the first place. There's no real cleanse coming, just more confusion layered on top of the chaos that already defines this era of the MCU. And the problem with Marvel's direction in phases 4 through 6 isn't just narrative aimlessness, it's that the entire operation was hijacked by external noise. Between 2020 and 25, the story wasn't just shaped by creative decisions. It was warped by a culture war playing out in boardrooms and writers' rooms. Politics bled into everything. Instead of storytelling influencing culture, culture began dictating storytelling. And Marvel, under Disney's spineless corporate umbrella, bent the knee immediately. Executives stopped leading and started following. They licked their finger, held it to the wind, and decided the safest bet was to chase whatever trending hashtag looked the least likely to offend someone. That's how you get a content pipeline run not by writers, but by consultants and HR departments. The mandate was clear: diversify, tokenize, replace. The creative logic behind it was non-existent, and it didn't start in the films, it started in the comics. Marvel's publishing arm had already been reduced to R&D for the cinematic machine, so when the comics replaced their core characters with a lineup of newer, more diverse counterparts, the films followed suit like good little brand extensions. Iron Man became Ironheart, Captain America became Captain Falcon Panther Man. T'Challa was replaced by Shuri, now functioning as Blacker Panther, but points because it's a woman this time. Apparently, being a legacy character and a girl is supposed to be enough. She-Hulk already existed, so she was repurposed into a fourth-wall-breaking mascot for Marvel's brand of smug, self-satisfied progressivism. None of this was about telling better stories. It was about ticking boxes. Representation became a replacement for writing. Instead of crafting compelling characters who happened to be diverse, Marvel threw out actual character work and slapped labels on cardboard cutouts. They didn't build new icons, they hollowed out the old ones and stuffed them with whatever identity buzzword happened to be trending that quarter. And surprise, surprise, it didn't work. The audience didn't buy it, because the audience doesn't show up just to be lectured. I didn't need to be a blue hedgehog to feel represented by Sonic. Audiences want stories, they want heroes, and they want reasons to care. Disney thought they could skip that part. And when Marvel decided to prioritize politics over characters, the rot didn't just seep into the stories. It started by infecting the hiring process. Instead of bringing in passionate creators who actually love the source material, they brought in people with no connection to the IPs whatsoever. In many cases, the only qualification seemed to be that their personal politics aligned with the ideological message Marvel wanted to shove into the script. Passion was replaced with agenda. Craft was replaced with credentials. Take Jessica Gao, for example, hired as the showrunner for She-Hulk. She had no particular love for the character, no prior experience in superhero storytelling, and no demonstrated ability to build anything resembling a compelling arc. But she checked the right boxes, so she was handed the reins to a project that went on to become one of the most despised shows Marvel has ever produced. And then there's Eternals, helmed by Chloe Zhao, who had zero background in action filmmaking. A fact that's painfully obvious in every dreary, momentum-killing frame. The result was one of the worst reviewed MCU projects in the studio's history. These choices weren't accidents. They were symptoms of a studio that stopped caring about storytelling and started building content around press releases. The impact on the writing has been catastrophic. Gone are the classic heroes' journeys. No, they're replaced by girl boss archetypes in Mary Sues who are already perfect, already powerful, and already right. Their arc isn't growth, their arc is the world finally acknowledging how flawless they are. Except that's not a story, that's a fucking TED Talk with CGI. The infection spread further in projects like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where Marvel bent over backward to justify domestic terrorism through the lens of identity politics. The messaging is blunt, shallow, and completely incompatible with the tone and themes the audience signed up for. It's narrative malpractice, like watching someone force a square peg into a round hole while insisting it's working perfectly. So, my friends, this is where the audience doesn't just lose interest, they turn on the brand entirely. It's not just, that wasn't a great Marvel movie anymore. It becomes, that was utter garbage and I'm done wasting my fucking time and money. That's the shift Marvel triggered, from disappointment to active resentment. And at this point, they've earned every ounce of it. So that's how we've ended up here, but what's the state of things right now? Point blank, Marvel Studios has become radioactive. Industry rumors, and at this point it's more like open truth, suggest that no one in Hollywood is particularly eager to work with them anymore. Visual effects houses, once a backbone of their spectacle-driven formula, now want nothing to do with them. Marvel has developed a well-documented reputation for grinding these studios into dust. Unrealistic deadlines, endless revisions, and budget micromanagement have pushed multiple VFX companies to the brink, and in some cases completely out of business. Post-Endgame, audiences started noticing and calling out the sloppy CGI. Yes, the movies are written like shit and they look like shit. What a perfect combination. Fight scenes looked unfinished, compositing looked rushed, and for all the talk of cinematic excellence, the final products often look like cheap video game cutscenes rendered on autopilot. The leaks confirmed what everyone suspected. Disney was bleeding these effects teams dry. Not only are they overworked, they're overworked for a product that looks worse with every release. And none of it comes cheap. These movies are financial monstrosities. Budgets are hyperinflated to levels that are laughably unsustainable. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness ballooned past $400 million as reported by Forbes. Even second-tier projects like Thunderbolts are costing over $200 million. When a film with that kind of price tag loses $50 million at the box office, you're not just looking at a flop, you're looking at systemic failure. Somehow Marvel was able to make Spider-Man Homecoming a legitimate blockbuster for $125 million, thanks to their partnership with Sony. But Ant-Man apparently requires $200 million and the GDP of a small country. That kind of bloat isn't creative ambition, it's corporate delusion. It's spending for the sake of spending with no discipline, no restraint, and no accountability. And it's not just anonymous insiders calling this out anymore. Benedict Cumberbatch himself has openly criticized Disney and the industry at large for how much money is being burned on these films. And he's right, the waste is staggering. On these sets, even the most irrelevant cast member has a personal chef, a chauffeur, and a trainer. Marvel has become a machine that hemorrhages money at every level, from development to post-production, and then they act shocked when the returns don't justify the insanity. And the leadership of this bloated empire collapsing under its own weight is just as directionless. Kevin Feige, once hailed as the mastermind who could do no wrong, now seems completely detached from both his audience and the material. This used to be a guy with his fingers on the pulse, someone who understood the fan base, the tone, the roadmap. Now he looks like a deer in the headlights. Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four may have been received better than expected, but that doesn't mean they were ever going to save the MCU. He keeps pushing these projects as if they're the foundation of the next big phase, but Fantastic Four was never the savior, at least not at this point. The two properties that had the potential to resuscitate Marvel were the X-Men and a full-scale reboot of the Avengers, and even that would require actual vision, not just reheated IP. The only real success stories post-Endgame have been Spider-Man, Deadpool, and the resurrection of Wolverine. And let's not forget, Logan's return only happened after the studio spent years crashing and burning. That wasn't a bold creative decision, that was fucking panic. Something interesting in common too is that what's been working for the MCU are projects and versions of characters that started at another company, Sony and Fox respectively, meaning what's successful isn't even anything in-house anymore. But instead of doubling down on what clearly works, Feige seems content to drift. There's no urgency around a follow-up to Deadpool and Wolverine, Marvel's last legitimate billion-dollar film. There's no strategic push, no momentum, just spinning in place. Then there's Blade, a character fans have been begging to see handled properly for years. A grounded, stylized, R-rated vampire action flick could have been made for like $70 million and delivered the kind of compact, profitable win Marvel desperately needs right now. But the project has been in development hell, gutted by rewrites and pushed to the back burner, all while Marvel runs around waving the flag of diversity, yet somehow can't get one of their most iconic black anti-heroes off the ground. The hypocrisy practically writes itself. Apparently Feige doesn't just want to dress a guy up in leather and have him kill vampires. Fucking what? You don't want that? Feige's own commentary is just as disheartening. He apparently believes Captain America Brave New World underperformed because it didn't have Chris Evans. The man can't even recognize the root of his own failure. The problem wasn't the absence of Chris Evans. It was the absence of Captain America. You can't slap the title on a film and then deliver something unrecognizable and expect the audience to eat it up. The film didn't bomb because the fans were confused. It bombed because they understood exactly what it was, and they wanted no part of it. At this point, it's hard to imagine Feige has any real plan left. He had a great run and did the impossible for over a decade, but he spent the last 5 years undoing his own legacy, dragging Marvel deeper into the pit with every misfire. He's not the guy to fix this. It's time to thank him for his service and show him the door. And the solution to Marvel's post-Endgame problems was staring him right in the face. The answer wasn't hidden in some obscure issue of Young Avengers or buried in a spreadsheet of demographic targets. It was right there. Bridge the gap with the X-Men, bring in the Fantastic Four, and start laying the groundwork for Doctor Doom as the next big villain. Maybe even the lead. You could have built the next saga around him or Wolverine. Hell, I called that before anyone, and I coined the term anchor character before Marvel even knew they needed one. You're welcome, Marvel. But that solution didn't happen. Whether because of rumored contract restrictions or sheer incompetence, they dragged their feet. And in a multiverse where literally anything is possible, they somehow decided to do nothing. They could have brought the Fox X-Men in years ago and begun a gradual MCU integration, instead of the pivot we got now. It would have satisfied the fans, re-energized the brand, and set up Secret Wars as a genuinely exciting reboot, rather than the damage control spectacle it's shaping up to be. Instead, they stalled and floundered. They pretended a plan existed when it clearly didn't. And now they're stuck and they know it. They absolutely cannot stop making Marvel content, not because they want to, but because they have to. Disney is too financially dependent on this machine. Marvel's revenue stream is a lifeline, even if the product is bleeding brand value with every release. The avalanche of garbage tier Disney Plus shows isn't just clogging the pipeline, it's keeping the lights on. And in the process, it's suffocating the very franchise it's supposed to sustain. This is what happens when creative exhaustion collides with corporate necessity. The slop has to keep coming, no matter how little anyone wants it. The beast can't rest, god damn it. It can't reflect. It can't reset. It can only consume and regurgitate until the audience is numb and the IP is worthless. Eventually, no one will care, even ironically, or even to hate watch. The burnout will become total, and Disney will be left trying to wring blood from a stone they shattered through overuse. The fans lose, the company loses, fucking everyone loses. What Marvel desperately needs is a 10-year break, a full reset, a hard stop, a real chance for people to forget and then care again. But that will never happen. Disney doesn't believe in breaks. It believes in quarterly revenue targets. So the MCU will limp along, decaying in plain sight, until there's nothing left to salvage. And what we are left with is something sad, not tragic and not heartbreaking, just kind of pathetic. Marvel, once the most dominant force in entertainment, has been reduced to scraping the bottom of the nostalgia barrel because that's all they have left. No vision, no strategy, no creative courage, just a blind scramble back to the past. They went crawling back to Robert Downey Jr., the face of a franchise that started almost 20 years ago, and parading out the Fox X-Men, dusting off a lineup from a different era. Because panic has finally set in and someone at the top realized they need something, anything that people used to love. It worked for Spider-Man No Way Home, so now they're hoping the same trick will carry Doomsday and Secret Wars over the finish line. And it probably will. These movies will crack $1 billion, maybe more. But that's not a comeback. That's a sugar rush. Nostalgia isn't a solution. It's a band-aid on a franchise that's hemorrhaging relevance. The real question isn't whether Secret Wars makes money, it's what happens after. And the answer is nothing. There's no next phase anyone cares about. There's no trust. There's no anticipation. A reboot is coming and the entire universe is going to reset. But who's going to care? Who's going to show up? Maybe Marvel figures out how to make cheaper films and learns to be satisfied with a smaller ceiling. Maybe they adapt to being just another studio in the pile. But the days of global domination are done. Phase 1 through 3 were lightning in a bottle, the rare alignment of passion, timing, audience goodwill, and cultural appetite. And that magic is gone. It's not coming back. Not next year, not in 10 years, never. The MCU is no longer the unstoppable juggernaut it once was. It's just another IP farm, churning out expensive noise. And no matter how much they reach into the past, the future is clear. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is dead. Long live the brand. Before I go, I just want to thank everyone over on Patreon who's been supporting me. We're having a blast over on Patreon with new exclusive reviews and videos dropping every week that aren't available here. So if you're interested, make sure to check it out. GG's.
I'm a Jewish guy!